Today's homework assignment: shoot 4 static shots, each of them communicating a different emotion. Love, fear, optimism, and loneliness. But if these are the shots that I turned in for that homework assignment, I would not give myself a passing grade, and here is why. Now, I get it. One of my primary responsibilities as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, is to get the audience to feel something. And one of the most powerful ways to do that is to bring the camera in close and allow your audience to connect with what is arguably the most empathetic thing up on that screen, that being the human face. I get it. But if you think that that is the only way to make your audience feel something, to get them to laugh, to get them to cry, to get them to scream, well, then you are in the right place. Our job, nay, our joy as filmmakers, is to translate what we see on the page into visuals and sounds. And we have at our disposal so much more than close-ups of faces. We have the cinematic tools of the frame, color and light, movement, the lens, texture, all of which I cannot wait to unpack. For today's homework assignment, we really are only going to be focusing on the frame, which means if you want to hear about the rest of them, I guess you're just going to have to subscribe and come back later. Whew, that's hot. Indeed, setting the frame really is the most fundamental act of filmmaking. Let's shoot this. It says, look at this, not at this. Look at that, rather than that. Look at this, or look at this. So, in preparation for this week's homework assignment, let's discuss 4 sub-factors when thinking about the frame. Those being aspect ratio, proximity, composition, and focus. So what exactly do I mean by aspect ratio? Well, it is the relationship between the width of your frame and the height of your frame. And there are a number of different aspect ratios that you can choose from 1.33 to 1.44 to 1.85 to 1.9, 2.0, 2.40, 2.76, 3.0. And why does it really matter which aspect ratio you choose? Well, because each of them elicits a slightly different emotional response from your audience. 1.33, for example, might elicit a slightly more nostalgic response, given the fact that many films from yesteryears were made in this aspect ratio. It also might make your audience feel that much more boxed in, constrained, trapped. Or perhaps it's simply the best aspect ratio to showcase your character's prowess, strength, and superhuman stature. So ask yourself which of these aspect ratios you think might best serve the story that you're telling, making the most sense of either the vastness or closeness of the visuals that you intend to capture. So here is my shot for optimism. Now the real question is, which aspect ratio seems to heighten the feeling of optimism all the more? 1.33, 1.85, 2.0, 2.40, 3.0. For me personally, I really love 2.0 and 2.40. Though it's subtle, the addition of the black bars allows me to adjust the image down just a little bit, featuring that much more prominently the openness above the character, subtly insinuating the future is open, ready to be explored, something to be optimistic about. Next, let's talk about proximity. And by proximity, I simply mean how close or how far away is the camera from your subject. Is it an extreme close-up? A close-up, a medium close-up, a medium wide, a wide, or an extreme wide. Now, like we talked about already, it is completely understandable to deduce that a close-up will carry with it the feelings of connection, intimacy, engagement, while wider shots might make us feel more distant, removed, observational. But one of my main objectives with today's homework assignment is to prove to you that you can still get the audience to feel something and connect with, perhaps even on a deeper level, with characters who are framed in a medium or even wide shot. The reason being, the environment around a character, which is much more prominently featured in medium and wide shots, can very much play into how we feel about that person, either because they stand in contrast to that environment, or perhaps because they blend into it. This is my son's favorite stuffed animal, Squishy, and I'm going to convince you that he is lonely. But how can I do this? He is, after all, an inanimate object, and I can't simply put him in close-up and convince you that this face is emoting loneliness. Though he is looking a bit sad these days. Nonetheless, I'm probably going to need to use the environment around him to add to and augment that emotion. Let's try. So here we are, creating Squishy's worst day. Squishy in my estimation, looks pretty stinking lonely. Why? Because of the proximity, the distance of the camera to the subject. If I was to have moved the camera closer, featuring more of Squishy and less of the environment, we would be far less likely to deduce that his emotion is loneliness. As it is, though, we see Squishy in contrast to the other stuffed animals who are all hanging out in a group together. I look at this and I say, that is a lonely stuffed animal. There is indeed so much that I could say about composition, but for now, what I really want you to think about when considering the composition of your frame are just two simple elements. The first of which being the focal element. Does your frame have a focal element? Does it have something that draws the audience eye to that thing before anything else? The reason why this is so very important is an audience needs something to grab onto. By and large, we humans like to be told where to start. And the same thing goes when we're watching a movie. Where should I look first? So how can we draw the audience's eye to a particular element within the frame? Well, there are a number of ways. One of them would be leading lines, allowing elements within the frame to quite literally point at your focal element. Another is contrast, allowing your focal element to in some way stand apart from the rest of the frame. Another way to draw the audience's eye towards a particular part of the frame would be geometric shapes. Our brains love simplicity and look for patterns, and geometric shapes provide that. Something else that our brains love and will constantly look for are things that look like ourselves. So figures and faces will almost always draw our eye first when looking at an image, no matter how crazy or busy the rest of the frame might be. Another way to draw the audience's eye is through variations in saturation. Stronger points of color having a stronger pull on us. Also, whatever the camera is focused on will help to draw our eye in that particular direction, as well as anything that is in motion. Once you've guided the audience's eye to that particular place, the next thing to think about is how you will structure the rest of the image around that particular focal element. Again, I could talk quite a while about this, but in simplest terms, what we're talking about with structure is how you're arranging the remaining elements around your focal element. Are these elements balanced? Do you want them to be balanced? If so, are they placed symmetrically around your focal element? Or are you using the rule of thirds? Or some other approach? So, given all that we've talked about, let's see what I can do. Shot number 3, emotion, love. Compositionally, you can see that I've used contrast and leading lines to direct your focus towards the couple. Like before, what is gained by pulling the camera back just a little bit and allowing us to not only see the body language, but also the very intentionally placed pieces of production design allows us to so much more clearly understand not only the story that's being told, but the emotion that's meant to be felt. And the fourth factor to consider when talking about the frame would be focus. Here again, I feel the need to push back on a trend that I see a lot of. There is this belief that the best thing you can do, the most cinematic thing that you can do with your image is throw your aperture as wide open as possible and have an extremely shallow depth of field. Only having your focal element in focus and allowing everything else around to fall completely out of focus. And while indeed there are instances where this approach is the right approach, in many more instances it's robbing you as a filmmaker of the ability to use the environment around the subject to help tell the story, to help communicate the emotion. So, for our final shot, emotion, fear. Let's be intentional with how we use focus. Now, truth be told, I actually don't hate this first iteration of the shot, which features a very shallow depth of field. We are still able to see this threatening character enter the frame, and some solid sound design helps to indicate that he's holding some sort of weapon. That said, I do believe the fear and danger are given an extra amount of clarity when the depth of field is deeper. There we go. Those are my 4 shots. I don't know about you, but I think we've come a long way from these 4 iterations. But I might just be a little bit biased. What grades would you give me for my finals? Was I able to, through the way that I framed these shots, communicate these emotions? But again, with those, I was really only considering the frame. We still need to talk about light and color, movement, the lens, and texture. Comment below and let me know which of those you'd like me to discuss next. Until then though, guys, thanks for joining me. I'll talk to you later. Cheers. If you made it this far, tell me, what emotion is that marker feeling?